Welcome, everyone, to Independent Reading, Deepens Student Engagement and Transforms Classrooms. We encourage you to live chat on YouTube with presenters and participants. You can find the link to this session's live YouTube page on gathering.theedcollab.com. We are pleased to welcome Nita Creekmore and Dr. Tawanda Harris to the stage.
Hello. Thank you so much, Abby.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you, Abby, for the intro.
Yes, definitely. We're so excited to talk to y'all about independent reading and how it's going to really, truly deepen student engagement and transform your classrooms. And we're excited that y'all are here. Or if you're looking at this later on, we're excited that you have tapped into our session. Just a little bit about me really quickly. My name is Nita Creekmore. I am a fifth grade ELA teacher, a former school-wide instructional coach, about 22 years in education, although I feel like it was just yesterday. I am also the author of Read Outside Your Bubble, Expand Your Bookshelf, Expand Your World, and a co-author of Every Connection Matters with my husband, Building, Maintaining, and Restoring Relationships Inside the Classroom and Out. And I'm so excited that y'all are here. And I'm going to pass it on to Tawanda.
Good morning, everyone. So I like to pride myself by saying I started off as a third grade teacher who I earned my stripes my first year in teaching. And then eventually I went on to be an instructional coach and then eventually working at the district level. And I would say that the most challenging transition from being a classroom teacher to working with adults, I could no longer say, I'm going to call home and tell your mother. So I had to make the adjustments and really just lean into helping people see the why behind it. Eventually going on to write a book, The Right Tools, and then becoming a college professor in which I work with teacher candidates. So I like to think of it as a full circle moment. I'm actually a professor at the very school I received my teaching preparation at. And so it's really cool to be able to go back and impact the educators and just really fill in the gaps where I feel as though I wish I were more supported in.
I love that. That's kind of cool that you're at the same school that you went to. I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So before we get started, I always kind of like to throw this big number out here when talking about literacy. And so this number, 48 million, my question to you all in the chat, and thank you all so much for your engagement in the chat. It is just blowing up. It just warms my heart just to see you all engage in the chat. So my question to you is, what do you think 48 million represents? What do you think 48 million represents? I'll give you maybe about 10 seconds to think through what 48 million represents. And it's so interesting. Okay, people in the US that are functionally illiterate, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I put this number out. I did a session with secondary teachers, and they were just trying to figure out, what this 48 million represents. And, we know that it's connected to literacy, but, what does this big number represent? And so it actually, in 2023, a survey was done, and this represents the number of individuals in the world that are reading at less than a third grade reading level. 48 million. Now that was in 2023.
Mm.
And so that's interesting because, hopefully, as we're thinking through what that means for us as educators, as we are engaging with students and thinking about independent reading and the value of independent reading in a student's reading life, I want us to really just kind of lean into the importance of engaging students and allowing them to have that agency over owning that process of picking up a book and falling in love with that. So you can go to the next slide. So in 2017, Pernell Rip, she did a blog, and I think this quote is just very timely. Even though in 2017 she wrote this, it says, "We're constantly reading for skill. We're constantly asking kids to do something with their reading. And then we wonder why they leave us and never pick up another book."
Mm.
When I start off the semester with my students, the course that I teach is literacy for early childhood education. And I ask them, what is, when did you fall in love with reading? Or what was that one book that you picked up and you said, oh my goodness, I absolutely love this book. And it is very disheartening because more times than not, I have students that say, I never picked up a book that I fell in love with. Actually, when I graduated, I decided to not pick up another book because every single time I picked up a book, there was an assignment connected to it. There was a grade connected to it. There was some sort of expectation connected to that experience outside of me just sitting down and falling in love with the words, the stories, and the experiences. And so we'll kind of talk about, so just, that just kind of frames our conversation. We know that independent reading is important, but it is as important for us as educators to rethink how we're leveraging it to strengthen students' reading skills, in addition to allowing them space to connect with the stories, allowing them space to deepen their conversations around text, have empathy and compassion as they are engaging in this experience.
Mm-hmm. You know what else, Tawanda? Like as a fifth grade teacher, I get a lot of students that come in that say like they don't like to read. Right? During open house, I'll say, do you like reading? And about 50 to 60% say no, right? And I say, why? And they say, I think reading is blank. So if you've had that same experience as me, I would love for you to put in the chat. What do your students say about reading? What do they say? I think reading is blank. I'll give you a couple of seconds there.
While people are putting things in the chat, and I think about my own child. It's so interesting when I think about her reading life. She had for years a private reading life, and so she loved to read. However, that choice was taken away when she was actually in school. So she would do what she needed to do, and then when she came home, she picked up her book of choice and just sat in the corner and just read. And so it's just disheartening to see how students have to separate the joy of reading to actual the academic side of, or the expectations that come alongside that.
100%, 100%. And so folks are saying exactly what my kids' why is because of that. They say either lack of choice or voice in what they can read. Some of the limited representation that they don't see themselves on the shelves. Another thing that like my students said was they struggle with reading, especially after we started really building that relationship this year. They were saying like, I don't like to read because it's hard for me. The pressure of performance. Another thing, like there's always something tied, like you said earlier, Tawanda, to that reading. This has to be something that you do next, right? The lack of modeling there. One thing that I've noticed is when my students read and then I'm reading a book too, or I'm reading something too along with them, they love seeing me, or I share my reading with them, like reading that I do at home, whether it's an article or some great book that I read. Like that's one thing I do share with them. But they also say like the interest, like having that interest. And one thing, and you were talking about your daughter, but one thing too about my son is that he was reading comic books for the longest time. And I did the thing that y'all are gonna be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you did that. And I was like, you're getting too old for comic books. You need to read a chapter book. You need to read something, a chapter book. You got to read something else because you can't just read comic books. He was like in middle school at the time. And you know what he did? He stopped reading altogether. He stopped reading altogether. And I was like, oh, like that can't happen. And so I allowed him to continue reading comic books, but I found a book that sparked his interest. And that book was The Crossover by Kwame Alexander.
Oh, that's a good one.
And it's written in prose, and he loved basketball. And when he read that book, I was reading it with him. So we were talking about it, having engagement about that. And then he asked for the prequel, which is Rebound. And so he got that book too. So the interest that kids have in books is so important, so important. And so including that and making sure that students have these things in their independent reading time, but also in our curriculum and in our lessons and thinking about that. And so in my book, Read Outside Your Bubble, I say this: building empathy and connections across differences. It begins with the books we choose as teachers and books we have access to, the books that the students have access to, right? And these are the books like in your classroom library, the books in your school library, have such a strong impact on our students' love of reading.
Yes.
On our students' love of reading. So thinking about and I'll pass it on to you.
Okay. And so, now let's talk about what independent reading is. I think it would be easy for us to say what it is not. But when we think about what independent reading is, I don't want to minimize. Now, let me tell you, this is confession time. All right. This is recorded. So now this is going to be memorialized. When I think about me being a first-year teacher, my school had this great idea to squeeze in dear time, drop everything and read. Right. And so I cannot say that I had fallen in love with reading at the time. And so that was a time for me to grade my paper. So Nita, when you were talking about how important it is for our students to see us reading, I'm like, okay, I don't have a whole lot of time. Let me just go ahead and use these. And it was only about 15, maybe 20 minutes by the time students settled in. Mm-hmm. And they dropped everything and read. And then that was it. That was it. And I think about just how I missed out on so many opportunities to kind of get a window into students thinking about characters, the connections that they were making, the stories that they, really, really found just insightful and all of these things. And so when we think about what independent reading is, it's important that it is student selected. I remember there was a program that shall remain nameless that kind of gave rewards based on how many books you read and you got points. Now, the problem with that idea of giving points based on the books that you read, certain books were worth more than others. Mm-hmm. And so it gave it misrepresented students that actually read a whole lot of books, but may have been only worth maybe 5 points or 0.5 points and so forth, versus someone else who read a longer book and it was worth more. And so students were receiving awards based on the points and not so much based on their love of reading. And that should have been the main focus of the celebration.
Mhm.
And so, thinking about independent reading, making sure that it's sustained reading of text. And then also, when you're also thinking about that independent reading, we also want to make sure that it's not just silent time, that it builds stamina. There's choice involved, identity, and joy. And we'll talk a little bit about the importance of joy
Mhm.
as well, that it is structured and intentional and teacher supported. Teacher supported. So this would not be the time that students are making up other work while it is independent reading time. It is
Mhm.
a time for students to really enjoy, fall in love with reading, and then share with their peers, and asking your students and having confirm with your students, what about this character is intriguing. I know there is another book in this series that connects to you. My daughter and I give a lot of examples of her in her reading life, but so she is in the 11th grade, but she loves why am I at a loss of the word? Oh my goodness. Okay, hold on one second.
You're good.
Uh, Ways to Make Sunshine. She loves Ways to Make Sunshine. Yes, 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 yes. So she loves the book Ways to Make Sunshine, and the first page talks about a character. Her name is Jaden,
Mhm.
and she always would get frustrated as a child when the sub would call her name and think that she was a boy. And she's like, just look up, or just, understand that my name could be any gender, but don't assume that I am one way. And, just seeing how it impacted her, and then also reading it in a book and having a character have that same experience is powerful.
Mhm. So, so powerful.
So, in my book, I talk about intentional text and resources. Being intentional, that word sometimes can be overused. Being intentional means I am going to be thoughtful. I am going to consider my students' experiences, their perspectives. I'm going to consider what is going on in the world. I am going to experience what is happening within the community. Think about these things. I am going to be very intentional on thinking through. And so, as I'm doing that, intentional text and resource selection ensures that independent reading supports what students need most. My
Mhm.
students in my first year of teaching are not the same students that I taught my 20th year in
Absolutely.
education.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we're also going to touch up a little bit on this slide right here, Tawanda.
Yes. So one of my favorite books that I use to teach or address like foundational skills and the idea of the science of reading. I know, whoa, I said that word, but really thinking about the science of reading through the lens of making connections with students. That it is not just about teaching foundational skills, but it is about self-regulation. It is about students being motivated and falling in love with reading. It is about finding the joy. So yes, we are talking about alphabetic principles. We're talking about decoding skills. All of those things are important. Yes, they lay the foundation. But
Mhm.
that alone does not build strong readers. That alone does not strengthen agency. That alone does not allow our students space to fall in love with the stories, the perspectives, all of these things. So, in the book Reading Above the Fray, this is kind of like an add-on to the what we're used to, the reading rope. And
Mhm.
so I'll just call out some of the differences, and you all can research it at a different time. But the active view, what I love about this is there is a component that sometimes goes missing when we're talking about building those foundational skills. It is this idea of motivation and engagement. So as students are engaging with text, we are keeping in mind that motivation and engagement piece, that executive functioning, as well as how they're using these strategies, not just with this text, but overall. Anytime I'm experiencing text, it could be when I'm reading a sign, it could be when I'm walking to the cafeteria and I see a poster, all of these ways that I'm engaging with text so that I'm able to transfer over these reading skills, the foundational reading skills, across my day and across my world as a reader. And so, of course, very timely, Dr. Goldie Muhammad, she talks about joy. And so this quote, literacy should center identity, intellect, criticality, and joy. And so we'll pause right quick, just maybe about 30 seconds. I want you to drop into the chat, what book made you fall in love with reading? What book was it that made you fall in love with reading?
While we're waiting,
Ask you, yes.
I'm going to share because I love this question because I was one of those kids, and I share this with my students, that really struggled with reading from kindergarten to fourth grade. I got pulled out. I had small group. But when I started reading the series, The Babysitter's Club, and I know sometimes people talk about series, but series books can really help someone to keep reading, right? And so I read Christy's Great Idea, and then Claudia came out, and then it was Jessie. And so that series helped me to keep reading, and it really built my love of reading, and it allowed me to open up to other books in series. The Fear Street series was another one I really loved a lot. So I see some folks in the chat also sharing some different series.
Yes. I see Sweet Valley High series.
Yes.
And let me see. I don't want to miss anyone. Let's see. Picture Books. Guess How Much I Love You.
Yes, that's another
Pokey Little Puppy. Love it. Phantom Toll Booth. Little House. Let me tell you, I'm about to date myself. Okay. Listen, it's okay. I've already did my confession earlier. So I loved the Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Oh, I did like
those. Oh my goodness, it was like you had a whole lot of books inside of one book. So it was like magical. How did it happen? I don't even want to know the process because I like the magical feeling in my head. But if I wanted to, go through this city or this journey or this path, I would turn to page 45. Right. And then I would read on the story. And so it gave me that idea of like, I'm in the driver's seat as I am navigating through this book. And I just fell in love with this idea of, oh my gosh, I don't have to lean on the author to tell me what happens at the beginning of the story to the end of the story. I'm able to switch it up. And depending on what my mood is, I could go back, pick that book up again and start all over again. So I really enjoyed that. And so I wanted to ask that question, what was that book that made you fall in love with reading? Because it is important that as we think about those pieces that helped us to connect or gave us sweet memories within our mind, I want you to allow your students space to think about what they enjoy about a book. I could teach comprehension in any book that I pick up.
Absolutely.
But it goes a lot further when students have fallen in love with the stories and the characters and made those personal connections with those characters.
Absolutely. So we can't forget that joy. We can't forget that joy. And oftentimes it's tricky to measure joy, but if we have conversations with students and we allow for student voice, they will share their love and joy for the books that we bring into the classroom or we give access to them. It really ignites their motivation and engagement. It really does. So we're going to tap into that. And here are some pictures of my students reading there 15 minutes a day. And I like to capture them. And I post these pictures all around the room about them reading and enjoying reading for themselves. But some of the reason that they do is because they're offered choice. They're offered choice in this reading. I provide books that are relevant to them. They're excited to read about themselves and read outside the bubble of other people as well. It ignites that joy. It ignites when they first came into my classroom and they saw all the books on my shelves and it was just so diverse. They were so excited to just pick a book off the shelf. And they were like, we could pick any book. I was like, any book that speaks to you, you absolutely can. And that just showed, that was so much joy for me as their teacher as well. It sparks human connection and it definitely builds that confidence. We want to build their confidence in reading. We want to make sure we do that. And to do that helps us as teachers to be better teachers for them as well once we build that confidence there. The impact on reading growth, and I know we're talking about definitely joy is the foundation, but also this is the impact of that reading growth because it builds fluency. When I was reading those Babysitter Club books, it helped to build fluency because I kept reading and building my vocabulary. And I would read out loud to my mom because I was so excited about it. I love to babysit. Babysitting was a thing for me. So it connected to my interest and increases that background knowledge. In that series, it had different characters and different diverse backgrounds. And one thing that Anne Martin said is that's what she was intentional about in creating those books. And then it also deepens the text connections as well. When you're, especially with the series, like we're connecting those texts all the time because it's with a different character as well. And so independent reading, it is the joy there. It is the love there. It is finding that choice. And it also impacts their reading growth as well.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so as we close out, we have a few more minutes remaining. We'll just quickly talk about what these implications are for reading. And so, for planning. And so as you're thinking about these moments that you will be intentional on creating for your students, think about this as you are considering where it fits within your day. Mm-hmm. The strongest effects its strongest effects are when it's paired with explicit instruction, also choice, joy, agency, and diverse text. I remember working with when I worked for a district and I worked with supporting a school, and students had to take a reading level text. And once they took this reading level text, they were given a card that showed their reading level on it. And then that card was then put around their neck. Mm. And then they lined up and would go into the media center. And the library was organized based on your reading level. And students were only allowed to go to that level in which they were considered to be reading on. And I thought, wow, mm-hmm. This is a visual of how to kill the joy of reading in a student. You could see on their faces how deflated they were when they could not go over to walk with their friends, or if they saw a beautiful display of different interests that they had, they couldn't walk over there because their lanyard did not show that color. Mm-hmm. And so, I understand the thinking behind building strong readers, but I do believe in that moment, those that made the choice to do that did not consider the value of choice, the value of agency, and the value of joy. And so as we are going through, our teaching journey, I want here's the challenge to you. I want you to think about those moments that you are intentional on allowing students space to experience joy with text. And that joy carries across not just reading, but it also flows into their writing.
Absolutely.
And so we hope that this session kind of help you to rethink what independent reading looks like, to see the value in it, and also to think of ways that you're able to rearrange your day or be an advocate to kind of show some of these things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we would also love for y'all to pay it forward. We'll have another snippet about that in just a minute. These are the charities that we have adopted for the Ed Collab, is Kids in Need of Defense and Mountain Projects. You'll hear more about that in just a second. But if you have any questions about independent reading, or reading for that matter, this is both me and Dr. Tawanda Harris's jam. Please reach out to us. You can find me at Love Teach Bless, and then Dr. Harris at Harris Innovation CG on Instagram as well. Thank y'all.
Thank you all for your engagement.
Yes.
Thank you so much to both of you. We hope you enjoyed the session. You can head on over to session 3, where we have some book ambassadors and also some inclusive teaching.